I'm Bob Strange. I'm an automotive consultant, and I've got one mission today, and that is to give you useful, real-world, and interesting information about the new Ford Escape to share with your customers. We're also going to reinforce the competitive advantages with this. It's a reminder of a competitive advantage that you want to pass on to your customers, and you're going to be seeing it a lot. Customers need to find value in what you say about Escape. When presenting Escape, group things into three major areas or thoughts, or you can consider them key attributes if you'd like. First of all, nimble and capable. Secondly, the interior package. And lastly, unexpected safety. Now let's fill in the details, starting with the idea of Escape's nimble and capable characteristics. It starts with the engines. Now, a key factor in Escape's nimble and capable nature are the available engines. First of all, let's look at the 3-liter Duratec engine. This is an optional engine, puts out 201 horsepower. Now, if you think of the competition, the Honda CR-V and the Toyota RAV4 don't even offer a V6 engine. Now, Jeep Cherokee has a 6-cylinder engine. It's an inline 6 that's been around for a long time. It's a 4-liter 6-cylinder engine, much bigger than Escape's, but only puts out 190 horsepower. The Suzuki Grand Vitara has an optional V6, but it only puts out 155 horsepower compared to the 200 horsepower in Escape. Now, obviously, by having this much performance capability, this much power in a vehicle like Escape, is going to give you more responsiveness and better acceleration characteristics than its competition. Now, this engine is only offered and paired with an electronically controlled 4-speed automatic transmission. Now, what this means in real-world terms is that, frankly, most people that are going to be looking at the higher-end engine, the bigger engine, are going to want the automatic transmission. But Escape also offers a 2-liter, 130 horsepower Zetec 4-cylinder engine. Now, this is offered only with the 5-speed manual transmission. It's going to appeal to that customer that's looking for really a sportier driving experience, that wants the 5-speed and is interested in having a vehicle that offers them performance and fuel economy, and frankly at a lower cost. Now, both of these engines use what we call 4-valve technology. There are 4 valves in each cylinder instead of just 2. Now, why would you want to use 4 valves instead of 2? Well, you're dealing with a cylinder, and the piston going up and down in the cylinder is what draws the air and fuel in. The way you get more power is that you put more air, therefore more fuel, into the cylinder. Now, to do this, if you only have one intake valve, you can only make that valve so large, so you're limited by the size of the valve and the space as to how much air you can get in. What can you do? Well, you can have 2 smaller intake valves. The area of the 2 smaller valves is greater than the area of one larger valve, and by doing this you can get more air, therefore more fuel into the cylinder, therefore more power, therefore more performance. So this 4-valve technology allows you to get better performance out of the same size engine as an engine that would have only 2 valves per cylinder. Now, another point of interest for many of your customers is going to be towing capability, and this is another area where Escape really shines. With the optional V6 engine and an optional towing package, Escape can tow up to 3,500 pounds. Now, this is going to allow your customer to tow just about any boat that any of them own. It has a 2,000-pound towing capability with the V6 without the towing package, and the 4-cylinder version allows you to tow up to 1,000 pounds. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that obviously what we're trying to do here is to hit the hard ones, the important issues. If you need more details, more information, please make sure you look in the source book for that. Now, when it comes to designing Escape for this nimble and capable capability, one of the things that we have to address are the ride and handling issues, both on-road and off-road. And what's been chosen for Escape is a fully independent 4-wheel suspension system. Now, this is somewhat different than some of the competition that use what we call a solid rear axle. Now, by a solid rear axle, what I mean is that the rear axle is truly just a solid piece. There's a solid connection between the, let's say, the right and the left rear wheel. Now, you can use tinker toys like this. I've got a 4-year-old, so I have plenty of these around. Or you could even use a couple of pencils off your desk to do this demonstration. With a solid rear axle, what happens to one rear wheel affects the other. Watch what happens. If you hit a bump with the right rear, it affects the left rear. Now that has an effect on both ride and handling. With an independent rear suspension, in essence, we separate the two, and each wheel can operate now independently. If you hit a bump with the right rear wheel, it does not affect the left rear. Again, this has a positive effect on both ride and handling. Now, you might wonder why people would use a solid rear axle. Well, one of the big reasons is that it's less expensive, but the second reason is that generally a solid rear axle is considered to have more strength, and this is true for the most part. Now, in order to compensate for that on Escape, the components of the suspension system itself are heavy duty. They're heavier components, they're stronger components, and they allow Escape to have both this independent suspension capability on road and have the durability to go off-road as well. And that's important to point out to your customers, that you can do both. One thing you need as a sport utility vehicle, really to call yourself a true SUV, is a four-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive system. And Escape has a brand new system called Control Track 2. Now, I think you're going to want to listen very carefully to this for more than one reason. First of all, so that you can tell your customers about it. And secondly, I guarantee you'll be tested on it in your certification process. So listen up here. First of all, Escape is a front-wheel drive vehicle, basically. The base vehicle is front-wheel drive. It's the only front-wheel drive sport utility vehicle that Ford makes. Now, for many of your customers, the front-wheel drive version is going to be more than adequate. You're very familiar with the advantages of front-wheel drive as far as traction is concerned. So keep in mind that Escape is, as a base model, is a front-wheel drive vehicle. Now, Control Track 2 works off of that front-wheel drive design. And here's how Control Track 2 works as far as your customers are concerned. It's a switch on the dash, and there's two positions. One says 4x4 auto, and the other says 4x4 on. And we'll talk about those in just a minute. All the customer has to do is turn between the two, but the one you're going to use the most is 4x4 auto. Now here's how this works. Remember, you're starting with a front-wheel drive vehicle. But with Control Track 2, what happens is this. If the front tires start to slip, there's too much power going to the front tires and you're wasting the engine power. There's no traction in the front to use all of that power. What Control Track 2 has is what we call a hydro-mechanical system. The difference in speed rotation between the front and rear tires when the front tires start to slip runs a pump, a hydraulic pump. The faster the front tires are spinning, the more output that pump has, and that pressure puts together a group of mechanical plates. So the more spinning in the front, the more power is transferred to the back. And obviously this is going to enhance the traction, because now you're going to be driving 4 tires on the pavement or on the snow or whatever you're on instead of just 2. You're going to get a traction advantage out of that. As I mentioned, there's also a 4x4 on position. Now, by turning it to 4x4 on, in essence what you're doing is you're locking the front and rear wheels together. Well, where are you going to use this position? Well, mainly you're going to want to use this in very severe conditions. Very deep snow, very slippery conditions, or if you're in a severe off-road condition where you always want to have power going to all 4 wheels. For most of your customers, they're going to put it in the 4x4 auto position and leave it there. So now that your customers are familiar with Escape's performance story, let's get them inside the vehicle. This is where this whole package story really comes to life. The beauty of an all-new vehicle is that you're starting with a clean slate, and this allows the engineers to use more innovation in their design. Let's just start with space. Escape offers comparable interior volume to the Toyota RAV4, the Honda CR-V, and the Suzuki Grand Vitara. And it's true for both people and cargo space. But it's more than just how much space or volume you have. It's really how it's utilized. Something else everyone has to have are cup holders in this day and age. There's plenty of cup holders, and they're large enough to hold just about anything in Escape. There are cup holders in the front, and there are actually 2 pop-out cup holders for your rear seat passengers. One of the things that I liked when I got into Escape and popped open the center console is how deep it was. It's large enough to hold this and still close the lid, And then when I opened the lid, I noticed that there's a place to store CDs hidden up in the lid of the center console. Something of a, as we call it, a surprise and delight feature, but it's a nice place to keep your CDs handy and out of sight. Now, one of the things I noticed when I got in as well is just the overall ergonomics. And by that I mean, this was one vehicle that when I got in for the very first time, it just seemed like I knew where everything was. It was very conveniently laid out and easy to reach. I've been in a lot of vehicles with folding rear seats, and a lot of them are just very difficult to use. I think they need to be easy to understand and easy to fold. Secondly, a lot of them just don't fold all the way flat. You know, if it doesn't fold flat, you're really not being able to use the space you're creating back here very well. And lastly, sometimes they're just not very comfortable. I think Escape has addressed all three of these issues. First of all, the comfort issue. This is the 60/40 fold flat rear seat, and it has the optional reclining seat back mechanism, which allows the rear seat passenger to put the seat back in a position that's comfortable for them. Secondly, this is a very, very easy folding mechanism to use. Just watch how this works. There's just a tab down here, a leather tab that you pull up. Fold the seat bottom up against the front seats. Then you just pull the headrest out, and there's actually a place to store the headrest, which is very convenient. Then pull this tab that I showed you earlier for the reclining mechanism. Seat back folds down, and as you can see, it's a perfectly flat floor. Now, one other feature here that may not be obvious that you need to show your customers is you actually can take the seat cushion all the way out. Just pull this out and you can remove it totally to give you a little more space between the back and the back of the front seats. Now keep in mind that Escape is an all-new vehicle. Now this is the first North American Ford sport utility vehicle with unibody construction. Now many of you are probably familiar with this, but let's take a look at exactly what unibody construction is and how it differs from a frame construction. And again, we're back to our Tinker Toys here. With a frame type construction, you have a separate frame that sits and attaches the suspension system to each other, and then you have a body that sits on top of this frame. Well, one thing about a separate frame, if this is the frame, is that unless it's designed to be very thick and relatively heavy, it's very flexible. Now with a unibody construction, what one does is attaches basically the entire body together. And you can show that very easily by doing this. Just attach the upper part of the vehicle to the frame part, and now look at this. There's virtually no movement whatsoever. It's very stiff and very rigid. And that's something that you want to have in a vehicle, and by going to a unibody type construction and attaching everything together, you can modify the stiffness of the vehicle and make it more rigid, more stiff. And here are some of the advantages to having a stiff, rigid construction. First of all, you can actually use these other components and have them be lighter weight. You don't need a very heavy frame because the other parts of the vehicle are helping support each other. So each of those parts can be lighter and smaller. Again, this cuts down on weight. You can have a lower stance. You don't have a heavy frame underneath, a large frame. Therefore, the step-in height can be lower, which makes entry and exit a lot easier. Another thing this more rigid structure does is increases the strength, durability of the vehicle, and it helps in terms of noise, vibration, and harshness, as you probably heard NVH. Another component of this stiffness that's very important is from a handling standpoint. With a very stiff structure, the suspension system stays perfectly rigid, the attachment points. If you have a structure that moves, the structure moving actually steers the vehicle all by itself. If you hit a bump, go around a corner and stress the structure, the wheels can actually somewhat steer themselves. With a stiff, rigid structure, the designed-in geometry of the suspension stays intact because of that rigidity. Now, these are just some design elements that are built in that are a little tough to see. There are some other design elements that are more obvious, but they are just as important and frankly maybe more so to many of your customers. First of all, let's take a look at the optional side step bars. There are these bars down here that you can actually use as well as they look good. Now during testing, it was found that 70% of the women that got into Escape actually used these bars to get in. That's more than twice as many in other testing with other types of step bars that may not be quite as easy to use. The second thing that makes the Escape very functional for many people is the liftgate glass in the back. Now, you may not think this is a big deal, but I'll tell you, I would use this all the time unless I had something huge. There are actually two levers or two grips underneath here, one for the door, one for the glass. It's very clearly marked. If all you're going to do is to put something small in the back, pull up on the right side, throw it in, put it down. Very easy for anybody to use. There's virtually no weight here at all. Now, the liftgate door is also very easy to use. Just pull this up and in essence it goes up by itself. Now, most of the competition have either one of two types of doors. Either the door opens from the side, which makes it very difficult to load. You have to stand back, open up the whole door to put anything in, especially if you're parked near another vehicle, like in a parallel park situation. Or they only have a one-piece door and don't have the liftgate glass. Now, I think that's a very important thing to point to your customers. Lastly, once inside, notice how flat the floor is. The spare tire is mounted underneath, in between the two suspension components, the two suspension systems, the right and the left. Remember when we talked earlier, if you have a solid rear axle, you can't mount the spare tire easily underneath because the axle comes all the way across. This is another situation where the design, the fully independent suspension, actually helps in terms of space. Spare tire is mounted low, you have a perfectly flat floor. Think about, for example, the Jeep Cherokee. The Jeep Cherokee has a spare tire mounted on the side, takes up a lot of space. Some of the other vehicles actually mount the spare tire on the outside on the liftgate. Obviously, that's almost always in the way, either visibly or physically. Now, one more key element to Escape is safety, and that's a very important element for most of, in fact, really all of your customers. Now, for my money, the safety aspects of Escape is not only impressive, but there's a couple things that are somewhat unexpected, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. First of all, 4-channel ABS with something called EBD is optional on XLS and standard on the XLT. Now, 4-channel ABS, you're familiar with ABS. 4-channel means that each wheel, each of the 4 wheels, can independently go in and out of ABS mode depending upon what is happening at that particular tire. There are many systems that are only 3-channel in which the 2 rear tires, the 2 rear wheels, are acted upon together with the ABS system. Now, I mentioned earlier that this system incorporates something called EBD. Now, EBD stands for Electronic Brake Force Distribution. It works with the ABS system, but in essence it's a separate entity as well. And here's what EBD actually does. EBD uses the sensors, the wheel speed sensors for the ABS system, and it has the ability to change the amount of braking force or pressure within the hydraulic brake lines between the front and the rear and between the 2 rear wheels, and it has the ability to compensate for road conditions, for loading. In a vehicle like Escape, you're going to have big differences in loading. You may have a lot of things in the back where there's more weight in the back. In that case, you'd want more brake pressure to go to the rear. If it was lightly loaded in the back, you'd want to be able to put less to the rear, more to the front. EBD senses wheel slip, and just as there's impending wheel slip, it can transfer more brake force, again, from front to rear or side to side in the back. This maximizes the amount of braking the tires can do, and actually does help to shorten stopping distances. Now, another thing we definitely want to discuss from a safety standpoint are the airbags. Standard driver and front passenger airbags are in all models of the Escape, and there is also an optional front side impact airbag system. Now, this system is designed to come out of the seats, not out of the door pillar. This is a much better system than is out of the door pillar for one reason. Regardless of where you put the seat, the side airbag is always going to be in exactly the same location in relationship to your body. Now, RAV4, CR-V, Cherokee, and Grand Vitara, none of these offer side impact airbags even as an option. Now, another key to these side airbags from a safety standpoint is that the side airbags in Escape not only protect your body or your torso, but also your head. Many side airbag systems out there only protect your body. This actually protects, again, the whole torso and head area. Now here's Paul Linden to discuss crumple zone technology as it applies to the Escape.
Now you'll notice with the Escape vehicle that we have a dual load path. You'll notice that the yellow beam over here is our upper load path, which will take approximately 30% of a major front end collision. It does have the crumple zones in it, but in a severe accident, the force will come up the A-pillar, along the roof rail, and down through the C-pillar. You'll see a lot of bending moment in the rear section of the vehicle and very little in the cabin. The idea is protect the cabin, take the energy and absorb it within the structure away from the occupants. Now you'll notice the lower load path, which should in a front end collision absorb approximately 70% of the collision, depending on the accident itself, connecting through the rail, through the lower rocker reinforcement. Again, the concept is take it away, take the accident signature away from the occupants, take it into the rear section of the vehicle, absorb the crash within the vehicle structure, but away from the cabin and protecting the occupants.
Now I'm sure you'll agree with me that the 2001 Escape has definitely raised the bar in the small sport utility vehicle segment. In terms of performance, package, and safety, this is an outstanding vehicle. Now here's a quick review of those vehicle features that you're going to want to include in every Escape product presentation. Under the nimble and capable category, we have the available 201 horsepower V6 engine, the up to 3,500 pound towing capacity, the four-wheel independent suspension, the rack and pinion steering, and the Control Track 2 system. Now in the interior packaging, we have the largest interior volume in the segment, 133.1 cubic feet. We have seating flexibility, the flat fold removable rear seats, the available 60-40 split reclining rear seats, lots of storage and cup holders, the all-new unibody chassis, the spare tire location, the liftgate with the flip-up glass, and the optional side step bars. Under the unexpected safety category, we have crumple zone technology, 4-channel anti-lock braking system with electronic brake force distribution, or EBD, driver and front passenger depowered airbag supplemental restraint system, and the available front seat side impact airbags. Now, of course, there are a number of other product features that you're going to want to highlight for your customers beyond the ones that we presented here. For more information on those features, visit the 2001 Ford product website, or you can look in the 2001 SUV source book or in Ford Frontline magazine. Now it's time to take all of these great features and tailor them for each individual customer that comes into your dealership. I'm sure you realize you've got a great story to tell.